Imagine for a moment that you are not in the 21st century, but in the quiet lanes of ancient Rome. The sun has just risen, its golden light falling upon tiled rooftops and marble courtyards. A birthday is about to be celebrated, not with balloons or fireworks, but with rituals, with offerings, with candles, and with cakes baked from honey and grain. Birthdays in Rome were not merely private affairs. They carried echoes of family, gods, and the household spirits. Each year's return of the day was a reminder of one's place in the turning of time. Morning preparations. In the earliest hours, the household bustled. Servants swept the atrium floor. Garlands were hung near the family shrine, and flowers were brought in from the garden. Rosemary, laurel, and roses were common. Their fragrance meant to welcome good fortune into the house. The birthday child, or adult, for Romans marked birthdays throughout life, was bathed, dressed in fresh clothing, and adorned with a wreath of leaves. This wreath was more than ornament. It was a crown, symbol of life renewed, of cycles continuing. The household gods, at the small shrine in the atrium, known as the Lararium, the family gathered. Small bronze or terracotta figures of the Lares, household spirits, stood watching. Offerings of wine, incense, and honey cakes were placed before them. A prayer was spoken, a request that the coming year be kind, that the household be kept safe, that health and joy might not wander far. This ritual was quiet, but essential. To Romans, no day of celebration was complete without inviting the unseen guardians to join the guests arrive. As morning deepened into noon, relatives and close friends came through the villa doors. They carried gifts, sometimes coins, sometimes small statues, sometimes garlands of flowers. Children might bring toys, while elders brought objects of symbolism. The birthday person was greeted warmly, often kissed upon the cheeks, and blessed with words of feliciter, happiness to you. The villa began to fill with voices, laughter, and the mingling scents of incense, flowers, and food. The first cakes, unlike modern sweet cakes of sugar and cream, Roman birthday cakes were humble but rich with meaning. They were often made of flour, cheese, honey, and sometimes a touch of olive oil. Round in shape, they represented the cycle of time, the turning year, the circle of life. Placed upon a table, decorated with nuts or dried fruits, the cake was lit with candles. These candles, though simple, carried deep symbolism. Each flame a lifelight, each glow a prayer rising upward, a moment of silence. Before the cake was cut, silence often fell. The birthday person closed their eyes, placed their hand above the flame, and made a wish. Romans believed that wishes whispered at such a moment carried weight, for the flame was a messenger to the divine. The candles were then blown out, and cheers followed, as they do even now across the centuries.
The feast begins. As the candles flickered out and laughter rippled across the room, servants carried in trays of food. Birthdays in Rome, much like festivals, were marked by abundance. Bowls of olives, plates of cheese, figs fresh from the market, and loaves of warm bread covered the tables. There was wine, too, always wine, sometimes mixed with honey, sometimes with herbs. For children and the elderly, diluted versions were poured, gentle and easy to sip. The feast was not just about eating. It was about sharing, for in Roman thought, abundance gained its meaning only when passed from hand to hand. Music and games. While food filled the air with fragrance, musicians entered, carrying lyres and flutes. Soft melodies threaded through the gathering, weaving calm and joy together. Children clapped to the rhythm, while adults smiled and swayed. After music, games followed, dice games on marble tables, riddles posed among friends, sometimes even small theatrical performances. The Romans loved entertainment, and a birthday was excuse enough to bring laughter into the home. Symbolic foods. Certain foods carried special meaning. Honey, for sweetness in the year ahead. Eggs, for new beginnings. Round cakes and loaves, for the cycles of time. Guests sometimes presented these as offerings, placing them before the birthday person with kind words. To eat them was not only to enjoy taste, but to invite their blessings into one's life. Public versus private. Not all birthdays were alike. The wealthy celebrated with banquets that spilled into courtyards, musicians hired for the day, poets reciting verses of praise. But in humbler homes, a birthday might be nothing more than a small cake, a prayer, and a shared meal with close family. Yet the essence was the same: gratitude for life, hope for the year ahead, and the bond of those gathered. The atmosphere of joy. The garden outside might have been strung with garlands. Fountains sparkled under sunlight. Servants bustled quietly, carrying wine cups and fruit bowls. Voices rose and fell, sometimes in laughter, sometimes in song. There was no rush, no urgency. Only the gentle awareness that this day was set apart from all others. This was a birthday, a sacred circle of celebration. Quiet reflection. In the midst of joy, there were also moments of pause. A father might sit quietly, watching his child's face glowing in candlelight. An elder might close her eyes, remembering her own birthdays past. The Romans understood that joy and reflection belonged together, that celebration was both feast and prayer, laughter and silence. And so, even in the middle of cheer, the birthday remained something deeper than merriment. It was, at its heart, remembrance of the gift of life itself. Offerings to the gods. No Roman birthday was complete without remembering the gods. After the family feast and laughter, there was often a quiet return to devotion. At the small household shrine, incense burned gently, carrying smoke upward like a soft thread between earth and heaven. The birthday person placed a simple offering, a small cake, a few coins, a sprig of laurel. Sometimes, wine was poured onto the ground as a libation. The act was humble, but meaningful, an acknowledgement that life itself was a gift from the divine. Temples and public prayers. For wealthier families, the celebration sometimes extended beyond the home. They walked to nearby temples, especially those dedicated to Fortuna, goddess of luck, or Juno, protectress of women. Priests recited blessings. Friends and relatives gathered to witness. The birthday became not just a family affair, but a public reminder of one's standing in the favor of the gods. For children, these temple visits were moments of wonder. For adults, they were symbols of duty, gratitude, and hope. Childhood birthdays. For Roman children, birthdays were both joy and lesson. They wore small crowns of flowers, played games in the garden, and received toys, simple dolls, wooden carts, or carved animals. Yet each year, parents also reminded them of their duty to family and gods. A birthday was not only about growing older but about stepping deeper into the fabric of Roman life. Adulthood birthdays. For adults, birthdays carried different weight. They marked milestones of service, of duty, of family responsibilities. Men celebrated years of military service or political achievements. Women celebrated years of marriage, of children, of care for the household. The birthday was no longer only a day of joy, it was a reflection of how one had lived, and what more might still be done. Soldiers on campaign. Even far from home, Roman soldiers marked birthdays. In camps along rivers and on frontiers, comrades gathered, sharing bread, cheese, and wine. A small cake might be baked if supplies allowed. Letters survive in history, where soldiers wrote home of birthdays spent on cold nights, thinking of families and temples far away. For them, the flicker of a candle in the camp was as sacred as any lamp in a villa. The circle of life. In every stage, childhood, adulthood, even in the hardships of war, birthdays reminded Romans of life's fragile circle. Each year returned the day, but each year also carried them further along life's journey. To celebrate was to recognize both joy and mortality, both presence and passage. And so, the Roman birthday became more than a party. It was a sacred mirror, reflecting family, gods, and the path of years yet to come. Birthday poetry. Among Romans, poetry was often a gift. Friends, especially those educated in letters, would compose small verses for the person whose birthday it was. These poems might praise their virtues, recall moments of kindness, or simply wish them many more years of health and joy. A short verse, written on papyrus or recited aloud, carried more than words. It was a thread of affection, woven into memory. Some of these poems have survived in fragments, still whispering voices of long-ago friends. Gifts of books and scrolls. For scholars, poets, or politicians, gifts often took the form of scrolls. A new book of philosophy, a freshly copied poem of Homer, or even a small collection of sayings could be given. These scrolls were tied with ribbons, carried in hands with reverence. To receive one was to receive both knowledge and honor, for wisdom itself was among the most precious gifts. The role of friends. Birthdays were not only family gatherings. Friends were central to Roman life, and their presence on this day was considered blessing. They brought laughter, stories, advice, sometimes even songs. They reminded the birthday person that life was not walked alone, but with companions at every stage. In their presence, a birthday became more than ritual, it became fellowship. Banquets and villas. In wealthier homes, the celebration stretched into banquets. Long couches were arranged around low tables, food was carried in endless courses, roasted meats, fresh fruits, honeyed pastries. Wine flowed, and musicians filled the air with melody. The villa's gardens glowed with lamps hung from branches. Statues of gods stood garlanded. The birthday host reclined among guests, honored but also generous, making sure each visitor felt welcome. Such banquets could last until late night, blending joy with ritual, food with meaning. Garlands and lamps. Garlands were not only decoration, they symbolized the cycle of time and the crown of life. Laurel, myrtle, and roses were most common, draped over doorways and hung upon statues. Lamps, lit in dozens, created a glow that stretched into evening. Each flame, Romans believed, carried away shadows, not only of the room, but of the spirit. Thus the decorations were not mere beauty, but gentle prayers, woven into light and fragrance. The day's meaning. By poetry, gifts, friendship, banquets, garlands, and lamps, the Roman birthday became something more than a day of birth. It became renewal. Each element reminded those gathered that life was precious, that joy was sacred, that even laughter carried echoes of eternity. Emperors' birthdays. In Rome, the birthdays of emperors were more than family events. They became matters of state, celebrated across cities and provinces. Markets hung garlands, temples lit extra lamps, and banquets were held in honor of the ruler whose life shaped the empire. Sometimes coins were minted with inscriptions marking the emperor's natal day. Poets recited verses in public squares, praising not only the man but the destiny he was believed to carry. Where an ordinary Roman might receive honey cakes and wishes, an emperor received festivals that echoed across nations. Public celebrations. In towns and villages, the emperor's birthday was marked with games and theaters, races and circuses, and sacrifices at temples. Citizens gathered to watch gladiators fight, chariots thunder, or musicians play beneath banners. The emperor's birthday became a calendar marker, binding people together in a shared rhythm. It was less about the man himself, and more about the unity his day symbolized. Soldiers and their leaders. For soldiers stationed on frontiers, the emperor's birthday was honored with solemn ritual. Camps decorated with greenery, sacrifices were made, and toasts raised with whatever wine was at hand. The emperor might be far away, but in those moments, his presence was felt in the loyalty of men who spoke his name beside firelight. The birthday became not only a memory of birth, but a living thread tying leader and legion together. The Roman calendar and natal days. Birthdays also shaped the Roman calendar. Important emperors' birthdays were declared dies natali, sacred days marked for remembrance. Temples recorded these dates, and festivals returned each year, layering personal memory into civic rhythm. For ordinary people, too, birthdays were added to private calendars, alongside anniversaries of marriages, victories, or dedications of temples. Each birthday was a point of light, guiding the journey of the year. The meaning of power and birth. In celebrating emperors' birthdays, Romans revealed their belief that birth was more than chance, it was destiny. A man's first cry marked not only his life, but the fortune of those he would rule. And yet, beneath the grandeur, the ritual was still the same: candles lit, prayers spoken, cakes offered, garlands hung. From humble homes to the palaces of Caesar, the symbols remained. Birth, whether of emperor or child, was always sacred. A gentle pause. When night finally came, citizens returned home. Lamps still glowed in temples, children slept with garlands hanging above doors, and poets' verses lingered in memory. The empire itself seemed to breathe with one rhythm: life remembered, life renewed, life blessed by time. The birthdays of women. In Rome, the birthdays of women carried a gentler rhythm. While men often marked their natal days with public banquets, debates, or even political gatherings, women's birthdays leaned toward the household. Friends, sisters, mothers, and children gathered in courtyards or gardens. Gifts of perfumes, fabrics, and jewelry were common, each chosen with affection. Songs were sung softly, sometimes accompanied by the lyre. The atmosphere was not grand, but intimate, woven with care, fragrance, and warmth. Juno's blessing. For women, the goddess Juno, protector of birth and marriage, was especially invoked. At her shrines, small offerings were made, candles lit, garlands of myrtle laid down, honey poured upon the altar. Mothers prayed to Juno not only for their daughters, but also for grandchildren yet to come. Each birthday became a moment where the goddess' presence was asked to hover gently above the household. Gifts of perfume and fabric. Perfume was a treasured gift for Roman women. Small glass bottles filled with rose oil or violet essence were tied with ribbons and presented with care. Fabrics, too, carried meaning. A length of dyed wool, or a carefully embroidered cloth, symbolized warmth and devotion. To offer these was not just to give beauty, but to give comfort. Household gatherings. In villas, women's birthdays often meant gatherings of close companions. They reclined together in shaded porticos, shared small cakes, exchanged verses of friendship. Laughter was soft, and the mood unhurried. Children presented flowers. Husbands offered jewelry or garlands. The household became a circle of affection, with the birthday woman at its center. The mother's role. For mothers, birthdays carried double meaning. They marked not only the day of one's own birth, but also the life of the family one had raised. Mothers often sat quietly, surrounded by children, watching candles flicker upon honey cakes. Their birthdays reminded everyone that through their care, the household itself continued. In honoring the mother, Romans honored the heart of the home. A thread of continuity. Thus, women's birthdays, though less public, carried profound depth. They bound family together, they invoked Juno's blessing, they honored not only birth but nurture. In their quiet strength, these celebrations revealed that joy was not always loud, but could also dwell in the calm of roses, in the scent of perfume, in the touch of fabric, in the glow of lamps. The birthdays of children. Among Romans, the birthdays of children were moments of pure tenderness. Parents prepared the atrium early, sweeping floors, hanging garlands, and setting out small cakes made of honey and flour. Children woke to laughter, to the fragrance of flowers, to the promise of gifts waiting at their bedside. Their birthdays were days where joy was allowed to bloom freely, where duties were softened, and where play became sacred. Toys as gifts. Gifts for children were chosen with love. Dolls carved of wood or ivory, tiny carts that could be pulled along mosaic floors, and clay animals shaped by hand were common. These toys were not simply amusements, they carried the promise of learning. A cart taught strength, a doll taught care, a carved soldier taught imagination of bravery. In them, children rehearsed the roles they would one day live. Protective amulets. On birthdays, children often received bully, small amulets worn around the neck. These were given especially to boys at birth, but on birthdays they might be renewed, polished, or replaced. Girls sometimes received rings or small charms. These objects were not for ornament alone. They were meant to guard the child from evil spirits, from illness, from misfortune. The birthday was thus both a celebration and a reinforcement of protection. Family rituals. At the Lararium, the family shrine, children stood beside parents and repeated simple prayers. They held flowers or little cakes in their hands, then placed them before the household gods. In this way, children were taught that birthdays were not only about gifts and play, but also about gratitude and reverence. The gods, like parents, were part of their lives, guiding and guarding. Games in the garden. After rituals, children's birthdays spilled into gardens. Garlands were hung between trees, laughter filled the air. Simple games were played, running races, tossing nuts, hiding and seeking among hedges. Musicians sometimes played flutes while children danced. Servants prepared sweet treats of honeyed fruit and sprinkled nuts. The garden became a place of delight, where every smile seemed blessed by the gods. Long life and hope. In every game, in every gift, in every prayer, the unspoken hope was always the same: may this child live long, may this child grow strong, may joy and health stay near. A Roman child's birthday was therefore more than a day of play. It was a promise, whispered by family and gods alike, that life was sacred and deserved to be cherished. Adult birthdays and banquets. For adults, birthdays were less about toys or games and more about honor, status, and fellowship. A man of means might invite his friends, his extended family, and even clients to join in a feast. The villa atrium would be decorated with garlands, the family shrine lit with fresh lamps, and long tables laid with dishes. Guests reclined on couches arranged around the food, as musicians played soft melodies in the background. These banquets were not hurried. They stretched across the evening, layer after layer of food, music, and conversation. Invited guests. Guests arrived in their best garments, bearing small gifts, often jars of honey, baskets of fruit, or fine wine. They greeted the birthday host with blessings of feliciter and sometimes even short poems. For a Roman, to be invited to another's birthday was an honor. It meant you belonged in the circle of trust and friendship. It was an unspoken acknowledgement of bonds, both personal and social. The role of clients and patrons. For men engaged in public life, birthdays also carried political undertones. Clients, those dependent on a wealthy man's support, would attend, offering loyalty and small tokens. The patron, in turn, would offer them food, wine, and kindness. On birthdays, these relationships were renewed, strengthened by shared bread and shared ritual. Thus, beneath a cheer, birthdays were also quiet acts of politics, reminders of who supported whom, and how ties of obligation were woven. Social bonds strengthened. Even outside politics, birthdays strengthened social fabric. Friends laughed together, families shared memories, children ran between couches, carrying garlands or cups of wine. Every shared story, every toast, every gift of figs or scrolls made invisible threads stronger. Birthdays were not only about the one born, they were about the community that carried life forward. Lamps, music, and laughter. As the evening deepened, lamps burned brighter. Musicians plucked their lyres, flutes whispered melodies through courtyards, and voices blended into laughter. The host reclined, smiling, content not only in gifts received but in the presence of companions. For in Rome, to be surrounded by others on one's birthday was the greatest treasure. A circle completed. By night's end, food was cleared, lamps dimmed, and the last guests departed. The villa grew quiet again. But the birthday lingered, not only in memory, but in the renewed ties of family, friendship, and loyalty. It was a circle completed, just as each year completed itself, only to begin again. Offerings at temples. Beyond the family shrine, many Romans carried their birthday devotions to public temples. On the morning of their natal day, they might visit a temple of Jupiter, Fortuna, or Juno, bringing baskets of fruit, honey cakes, or a small jug of wine. The priest accepted these offerings, chanting prayers that echoed softly through marble halls. Smoke from incense curled upward toward painted ceilings, as if carrying the year's hopes into the realm of gods. For the birthday celebrant, this act was reassurance. It meant that their life, their health, their very breath was seen and blessed by higher powers. Poets and odes. In cultured households, birthdays were occasions for poetry. A friend might rise at the banquet, holding a cup of wine, and recite a verse in honor of the celebrant. These poems praised virtues, remembered kindnesses, or wished for future fortune. For statesmen, poets might compose elaborate odes, later copied and preserved. Words became gifts, each syllable carrying affection or respect. And sometimes, the soft voice of poetry lingered longer than the taste of food or the glow of lamps. Symbolic candles. The candle, so small and humble, carried deep meaning. Its flame was a soul, its glow a bridge between mortal and divine. On birthdays, candles were lit not only upon cakes but also at shrines. Each flame marked a year lived, each flicker a prayer for the years yet to come. When the birthday person blew out the candles, the silence of that breath was believed to carry wishes straight to the gods. In that single act, joy and reverence became one. The role of astrology. Romans also believed that birthdays were not only personal, but cosmic. Astrologers, consulted on such days, read the alignment of stars and planets. They explained how a person's natal day, its hour, its celestial markers, shaped fortune, character, and destiny. Though not all trusted these readings, many listened carefully, taking comfort in the thought that the universe itself marked their day. A web of meaning. Thus, a Roman birthday was never just one thing. It was ritual at home, offering at the temple, poetry at the banquet, candles glowing in silence, and sometimes even whispers of the stars. It was a web, woven from family, friends, gods, and heavens, binding one life into the greater fabric of time. The evening quiet. By evening, when lamps burned low and guests had departed, the celebrant might sit alone, remembering the prayers, the poems, the laughter. The day was theirs, yet also belonged to the gods, the stars, and the community around them. It was both intimate and infinite, both fleeting and eternal. Birthdays in the countryside. Not all Romans lived in villas of marble or houses with painted walls. Beyond the city, in villages and farmlands, birthdays were celebrated with simplicity, in tune with the earth itself. The farmer's birthday began at dawn, often with chores still to be done. Animals needed feeding, fields needed tending. Yet, even within the rhythm of labor, the day was marked as different, set apart quietly from the others. Simple offerings. At a small wooden shrine in the corner of the farmhouse, the family laid offerings, perhaps a bowl of milk, a loaf of bread, or a handful of grain from the store. These were not grand gifts, but they carried sincerity. The gods of hearth and field were asked to bless the family, the crops, and the animals. For the farmer, his birthday was woven into the life of the land he tilled. The humble meal. Instead of great banquets, country folk marked the day with a humble but special meal. Bread freshly baked, cheese cured from the farm's milk, olives brined by careful hands, figs from nearby trees. A little honey was spread upon cakes made of grain, the sweetness a rare delight. Wine, often rough and strong, was poured into shared cups. The family gathered close around the table, their laughter rising with the smoke of the fire. Blessings of nature. In the countryside, blessings were spoken not only by priests or astrologers, but by the earth itself. Birdsong in the morning, the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze, the glow of stars above the fields, each seemed to whisper that life was precious, that another year was a gift. Parents blessed their children with words as steady as the soil. Elders touched foreheads and whispered wishes for strength and harvest. Simplicity is sacred. Though no poets recited verses and no musicians filled the air, the quiet of rural birthdays carried a sacredness of their own. The crackle of firewood, the fragrance of bread, the warmth of shared presence, all became offerings as holy as incense in marble temples. For the farmer, the cycle of life was already mirrored in the seasons. His birthday was another seed, planted in the soil of time. A night under the stars. When the meal was done and lamps were dimmed, the family might step outside. Children looked upward, pointing at constellations. Adults stood silently, breathing the cool air, feeling the vast sky above their little farm. It was in this silence that the birthday found its deepest voice, not in grandeur, but in stillness. Life, like the stars, was both fragile and eternal. Birthdays of slaves. In the grand villas and bustling streets of Rome lived countless slaves. For them, birthdays were often quiet, unnoticed by masters, yet still remembered in the privacy of their hearts. A slave's birthday might pass with duties unchanged, cooking, cleaning, serving. Yet, in small ways, they marked the day. A whispered prayer before the household gods. A secret piece of bread set aside. A glance upward at the sky, reminding themselves of the day their life began. It was not a celebration of grandeur, but of endurance, of hope that life itself remained theirs even in bondage. Small gestures. Sometimes, fellow slaves found ways to honor one another. A tiny garland of wildflowers, a small cup of wine secretly shared in the kitchen, a word of encouragement whispered at dawn. In these little gestures, they created warmth. The birthday became less about gifts, more about human kindness in difficult lives. Freedmen and their joy. For freedmen, slaves who had gained liberty, the birthday carried even deeper meaning. It was not only the anniversary of birth, but also a celebration of freedom, a second life. On such days, they sometimes offered thanks at temples, pouring wine for the gods who had carried them into liberty. They invited friends, shared meals, spoke of the years of struggle now behind them. The birthday became a marker of identity, proof that they had survived, that their life was their own. Gifts of freedom. There were rare but powerful moments when a master, moved by affection or loyalty, granted freedom to a slave on their birthday. Imagine such a day, the gathering of household, the words spoken, the granting of a small cap, the pileus, symbol of liberty. For the freed slave, that birthday was not only a day of celebration, but the rebirth of their soul. It was a gift unmatched, greater than gold or jewels. Quiet joy amid hardship. Even without freedom, birthdays for slaves and humble folk were sparks of light in long years of labor. The taste of honey on bread, the blessing of a friend, the comfort of memory, these were enough to make the day sacred. For in Rome, as in every time and place, joy did not belong only to the powerful. It lived quietly also in the hearts of those who had little, yet carried hope. A shared humanity. In the end, whether emperor or slave, villa master or farmer, all Romans shared the rhythm of birthdays. Each year returned the day. Each day reminded them of breath, of time, of the turning circle of life. And even in hardship, that reminder was precious. Birthday prayers. Every Roman birthday carried the sound of prayer. These were not long speeches, but short invocations, spoken softly at the household shrine. The birthday person might stand with hands raised, palms open to the sky, and whisper thanks for the year lived, asking gently for the year ahead. The words were simple, but the meaning deep: give health, give safety, give joy, and let the circle of years continue. The role of priests. In larger households, or on important birthdays, priests were invited. Clad in white, they sprinkled wine, placed incense on glowing coals, and chanted formulas passed down through generations. Their voices rose steady and calm, echoing across courtyards or temple halls. With each chant, the family felt the presence of divine order, the alignment of life with sacred rhythm. It was believed that such blessings guarded the celebrant, weaving divine favor into the fabric of their days. Family invocations. Yet most often, it was the family who spoke blessings. Mothers touched children's foreheads with drops of oil, fathers placed hands upon shoulders, elders murmured kind words of longevity. These small invocations carried as much power as any priestly chant. For Romans believed that the voice of family itself was sacred, that bonds of blood carried prayers swiftly to the gods. Sacred words. Certain words were always spoken. Feliciter, happiness to you. Vivas annos multis, may you live many years. These phrases, repeated across centuries, became like candles themselves, glowing, enduring, carrying warmth wherever spoken. They were not only wishes, but gentle commands to fate, urging it to favor the one who stood crowned with garlands on their birthday. Ritual actions. Prayers were often paired with gestures. pouring wine upon the ground, scattering flower petals across thresholds, breaking a honey cake into pieces and sharing it. Each act symbolized connection, between family, between gods, between the living and the unseen. And so the birthday was never mere festivity. It was a dialogue with eternity, spoken in flowers, in fire, in bread, in breath. A quiet circle. When the prayers ended, the house seemed quieter, lighter. Candles glowed softly, garlands swayed in silence, and the birthday person felt held, not only by family, but by the gods who had heard their names spoken aloud. It was in these moments that the Roman birthday revealed its soul, not noise or spectacle, but a circle of reverence, as timeless as the turning year. The birthdays of philosophers. Not every Roman birthday was filled with feasts and music. Among philosophers and scholars, the day was observed in quieter ways. In small courtyards or shaded libraries, students gathered around their teacher. Instead of games or banquets, there was reflection, reading, and the soft murmur of ideas exchanged. For them, the birthday was a time to honor the gift of wisdom, to celebrate not only years lived, but knowledge gained. Thoughtful gatherings. A philosopher's friends might bring scrolls of poetry, commentaries, or small lamps carved with symbols of learning. They sat upon stools and cushions, shared bread and figs, and spoke not of politics or wealth, but of the soul, of virtue, of the meaning of time itself. The birthday thus became a conversation, one where each voice added light, much like candles glowing against the dark. Gifts of wisdom. Books, copied patiently by scribes, were common gifts. A volume of Homer, a treatise of Plato, a collection of Roman poetry, these were treasures beyond gold. Some friends composed their own essays, dedicating lines to the celebrant. Others brought tokens such as writing tablets, wax boards, or styluses, all meant to carry thought into future days. The gifts themselves were not grand, but they nourished the mind, and for scholars, that was the deepest honor. Conversations under lamplight. As evening settled, lamps were lit along shelves of scrolls. The warm glow spread across the room, softening marble floors and wooden tables. Friends leaned close, voices low, speaking of philosophy, of life, of mortality. They recalled birthdays past, and wondered gently about years to come. There was no music, no crowd, no revelry, only the stillness of thought, the companionship of minds gathered together in quiet respect. The philosophical view of birthdays. For some, birthdays were not moments of personal glory but reminders of the fleeting nature of life. Stoics, especially, taught that each year lived was not a possession, but a loan from time. And so they celebrated not with pride, but with humility, gratitude, and awareness. Each candle lit was a flame of mindfulness, each cake shared a lesson of mortality and continuity. The peace of the scholar's birthday. When the gathering ended, scrolls were rolled away, lamps extinguished. The philosopher remained in his chamber, content not in noise, but in stillness. His birthday had been honored not by abundance, but by wisdom, by words spoken softly, by knowledge passed from friend to friend. And in that silence, the day found its truest blessing. Coming of age. Among the Romans, some birthdays marked more than another year of life. They marked a transition, when a child stepped from innocence into responsibility. For boys, this moment came when they laid aside their childhood amulet, the bulla, and donned the toga of manhood. For girls, it came with betrothal or marriage, when they were honored as women of the household. These birthdays carried deep symbolism. They were not only celebrated, they were remembered as turning points in the story of life. The boy's toga. On his coming-of-age birthday, a boy removed the simple toga of childhood and was dressed in the toga virilis, the white toga of citizenship. Surrounded by family and friends, he walked to the forum with his father, greeted by the sight of statues, temples, and bustling markets. This walk was not just ceremony, it was initiation. The boy now stood among men, counted as a citizen, ready to take his place in civic life. Offerings of the bulla. The amulet that had guarded him through childhood, the bulla, was often dedicated to the household gods or placed in the temple of Lares. This offering symbolized the passage from childhood's protection to adulthood's responsibility. The act was quiet, but its meaning was vast, a life now entrusted not to charms, but to one's own virtue and actions. The girl's threshold. For girls, birthdays of coming of age were marked differently. Families gathered, garlands hung, and prayers were offered to Juno, goddess of women. The girl might receive gifts of fabric, jewelry, or household tools, symbols of her future role as wife and mother. Though her path was different from the boys, the meaning was similar, a crossing of threshold, a step into the world of new duties and honor. Family pride. On these days, families felt not only joy but pride. Parents saw their children step forward, elders offered blessings, and siblings celebrated with laughter. The birthday became more than a private joy, it was a public declaration that life continued, that the household grew, that the future was secure. Ritual of continuity. Through garlands, offerings, new garments, and whispered prayers, the Romans tied birthdays to the great thread of continuity. Each child who came of age reminded the family, and the city, that time moved forward, that the circle of generations remained unbroken. And so, the birthday was both celebration and passage, both feast and farewell to a chapter now closed. The birthdays of generals. In Rome, the birthdays of great generals carried a special weight. These were men who had led armies, crossed rivers, and carved victories into the memory of the Republic and Empire. On their natal day, soldiers, veterans, and citizens alike gathered to honor them. Their houses were filled with garlands, musicians played, and storytellers recounted victories past. The general's life was not only celebrated for his birth, but for the fortune he had brought to Rome. Soldiers' tributes. When a general was still in the field, soldiers marked his birthday in camp. They decorated standards with wreaths, lit extra lamps, and shared whatever food could be spared. Sometimes, men carved simple cakes from bread and offered them with shouts of loyalty. Around campfires, they retold battles, praised his leadership, and raised toasts to his health. For the common soldier, the general's birthday was more than ritual, it was a reminder that their lives and fortunes were bound together. Victory remembered. Birthdays of generals often blended with anniversaries of victories. A man born in spring might have won a great battle in the same season years later. Thus, his natal day became a double memory, of life begun, and of triumph achieved. Temples were sometimes dedicated on these days, statues raised, and sacrifices offered. In this way, the general's life and Rome's destiny seemed to intertwine. Martial celebrations. In villas and city squares, these birthdays could take on a martial tone. Shields polished, swords displayed, laurel crowns placed upon the general's head. Children played at being soldiers, running with wooden swords. Veterans wore medals or carried standards, honoring the bond of war. Even within feasting and laughter, the presence of discipline and honor was felt. The birthday was as much about Rome's strength as about the man himself. Public and private. Yet, even for generals, the day returned home. After the parades and speeches, after the toasts and tributes, the man returned to his hearth. There, with family gathered close, he ate bread and fruit, listened to children's laughter, and prayed to the gods in gratitude. For even heroes, a birthday was not only about power, but about the quiet circle of family. The eternal thread. Thus, the birthdays of generals revealed Rome's dual nature, both martial and tender, both fierce in battle and gentle at home. They showed that even those who shook the world with war still paused once a year to remember life's simple gift, the day they were born. Birthday foods. No Roman birthday was complete without food. From the humblest cottage to the grandest villa, the day was marked by special dishes, prepared with extra care. Food was more than nourishment. It was symbol, it was offering, it was memory. Each bite carried meaning, each flavor was a prayer. Honey cakes. At the center of nearly every birthday lay the honey cake. Made of flour, eggs, and sweet honey, sometimes flavored with nuts or spices, it was baked in simple clay ovens. Candles, often small tapers, were placed upon the cake. Their flames glowed like stars, each year counted in flickering light. When the celebrant blew them out, wishes were made silently, carried on breath toward the unseen gods. The sweetness of honey was not only taste but omen, it promised that the year ahead might be as sweet as the cake itself. Fruits of the season. Tables were filled with fruits, figs, grapes, apples, pears. In autumn, pomegranates gleamed like rubies, in summer, melons cooled the air. Each fruit carried a whisper of the earth's blessing. Figs for fertility, grapes for joy, apples for love, pomegranates for eternity. Children delighted in these gifts, sticky fingers holding treasures plucked from orchards and vineyards. Wine a celebration. Wine flowed in goblets, mixed with water, flavored sometimes with honey or herbs. For Romans, wine was both drink and ritual. To lift a cup on a birthday was to lift a prayer. To sip was to join in fellowship, to share in joy, to seal bonds of family and friendship. Even in humble homes, a small jug of rough wine might be poured, marking the day as set apart. Feasting traditions. Wealthier homes served roasted meats, fresh fish, loaves of warm bread, and platters of olives. Slaves carried dishes into tricliniums, where guests reclined and ate at leisure. In rural villages, meals were simpler, gruel made richer for the day, cheese cut with care, vegetables gathered fresh. But whether humble or grand, the act of feasting together was the true treasure. Symbolic flavors. Sweetness of honey for joy. Salt for strength. Wine for fellowship. Grain for life itself. Each food became a message, each flavor a symbol. Eating on a birthday was never only for the body, it was also for the soul, for memory, for blessing. A banquet of time. As lamps glowed and food was shared, Romans felt themselves part of a banquet larger than any single day. It was the banquet of time itself, each year another dish served, each birthday another course in the feast of life. The sound of celebration. In Rome, no birthday was silent. From city villas to country courtyards, the day carried sound, of music, of song, of gentle laughter. Romans believed that harmony itself was a gift, and so on birthdays, instruments were played as offerings of joy. The air shimmered not only with the glow of candles, but with the threads of melody weaving through the day. Flutes and lyres. The soft breath of flutes often accompanied birthday gatherings. Their notes rose gently, like birdsong in the morning. Lyres, plucked by skilled fingers, filled the air with rippling chords that seemed to echo the beating of the heart. Children swayed to these tunes, elders nodded in rhythm, and even the most serious men softened when music carried them into memory. Songs of friendship. Guests sometimes sang verses, simple chants of good fortune, or old songs passed down through generations. These were not performances meant to impress, but offerings meant to bind hearts. A chorus of voices whispering Feliciter was more powerful than any speech. In those moments, music became prayer. Dancers and performers. In wealthier houses, dancers performed, their movements slow and graceful, weaving patterns that imitated myths and gods. Jugglers and jesters also appeared at times, delighting children with tricks, laughter, and small bursts of humor. Though light-hearted, even these acts were seen as sacred, for they reminded the household that joy was divine. Music for the soul. Yet, the most enduring music was not loud or grand. It was the quiet strumming of a lyre at twilight, when lamps were lit and shadows grew long. In such moments, music became a companion to reflection, a soft comfort for the soul. The birthday, with all its prayers and feasts, settled gently into the heart through melody. The harmony of life. For Romans, the sound of instruments and voices on birthday symbolized harmony itself, harmony of family, of friends, of the soul with the gods. Just as flutes and lyres blended in song, so too did lives blend in celebration, weaving together joy and memory. Night's quiet return. When music ended and guests departed, silence returned like a blessing. The echoes of melody lingered in courtyards, as if carried upward with the smoke of lamps. And in that quiet, the birthday reached its softest, sweetest conclusion. The language of symbols. Every Roman birthday spoke in symbols. Beyond food, music, and prayers, the spaces themselves were adorned with meaning, garlands, lamps, flowers, and ornaments, each chosen carefully to whisper blessings into the day. These decorations were not only for beauty. They were messages, silent prayers hung upon walls and doors. Garlands of green. Garlands woven of laurel, ivy, or myrtle were hung across thresholds, around pillars, and upon chairs of honor. Greenery symbolized life's renewal, the eternal return of seasons, the promise that the year to come would flourish like spring leaves. Children played with these garlands, sometimes placing them on their own heads, laughing as though crowned with fortune. Flowers as blessings. Fresh flowers filled homes and courtyards. Roses for love, violets for modesty, lilies for purity, and poppies for rest. Placed in bowls of water, scattered upon tables, or worn in hair, flowers infused birthdays with fragrance and color. Their presence was fleeting, but that very fragility reminded Romans of life itself, beautiful, delicate, and worth cherishing each year. Lamps of light. On birthdays, lamps were lit in abundance. Oil burned through the day, casting warm glows upon painted walls and mosaic floors. Light was a prayer against darkness, a symbol of the soul enduring. Just as candles upon cakes symbolized life's flame, so did household lamps extend that glow into every corner of the home. Ornaments of meaning. Some families placed statues of household gods near the celebrant's seat, draped with ribbons or crowned with flowers. Others displayed tokens of fortune, coins polished, amulets tied with thread, or figurines of animals representing strength or luck. These objects reminded guests that the birthday was not only about the person, but about the unseen powers guiding their life. Colors of joy. Romans favored bright colors on birthdays. Red ribbons tied around doors to ward away evil, white cloth spread across tables for purity, gold threads woven into garments for prosperity. The house itself became a canvas of blessing, each shade chosen to protect, to honor, to celebrate. A space transformed. Thus, through garlands, flowers, lamps, ornaments, and colors, the birthday transformed ordinary spaces into sanctuaries of joy. When guests entered, they stepped not only into a house, but into a world reshaped for blessing, every corner glowing, every scent speaking, every symbol alive with meaning. Silent messages. And when the day ended, decorations remained, their petals fading, their garlands wilting. Yet even in their decline, they whispered softly, life is brief, but it is beautiful, and each birthday is a chance to honor that truth. The birthdays of emperors. In the Roman world, the birthday of an emperor was not only a private occasion, it was a festival for the empire itself. Across cities and provinces, temples rang with prayers, markets closed their doors, and crowds gathered in forums to honor the natal day of the ruler who stood as guardian of Rome's fate. The emperor's birthday was woven into the calendar as if it were sacred time itself, joining the rhythm of seasons and festivals. Public spectacles. Games in the circus were often held, with chariots racing in a whirl of speed and color. The roar of the crowd rose like thunder, not only in celebration of sport, but as tribute to the life of the emperor. In amphitheaters, gladiators fought, their courage seen as a reflection of Rome's might. For citizens, to watch was both entertainment and loyalty, a visible thread binding them to their ruler. Temples and altars. On such days, sacrifices were offered at temples dedicated not only to the gods, but sometimes to the emperor himself. Incense burned, garlands crowned statues, and prayers were spoken for the prosperity of Rome under his reign. Citizens lined up to leave offerings, coins, fruits, or oil, believing that to honor the emperor's birthday was to secure blessings for the city itself. Feasts for the people. In many towns, the emperor's birthday brought feasts for the people. Grain was distributed, wine poured, and bread handed out freely. Children clutched sweet cakes. Families gathered in squares, voices rose in cheer. The birthday thus became not only the emperor's celebration, but a moment where every Roman, rich or poor, felt part of the joy. Statues and banners. Streets were decorated with banners, statues of the emperor draped with flowers. In some places, musicians paraded through streets, filling the air with the echo of drums, flutes, and horns. Every symbol, every note reminded people that Rome's strength was embodied in the life of the man they celebrated. A day of empire. While the emperor feasted in his palace, surrounded by senators, generals, and family, the empire itself became one vast household. From the smallest village to the greatest city, the natal day echoed like a festival bell, its sound carrying across mountains, rivers, and seas. The echo of power. Yet, when the spectacles ended, when crowds dispersed and torches burned low, the birthday revealed its quiet truth. Even for an emperor, the day was still the same as for every Roman, a reminder of birth, of time's passing, of life's fragile flame. In the grandeur of empire, the simple heart of the birthday still remained, the gift of one more year beneath the stars. A circle completed. From the humblest farmhouse to the grandest palace, from a child's laughter to an emperor's games, birthdays in Rome carried the same essence, the honoring of life's fragile gift. Each candle lit, each prayer whispered, each garland hung spoke of gratitude. Each year was seen as both memory and promise, both a treasure held and a hope extended. Threads across society. We have walked through the birthdays of children and elders, farmers and generals, slaves and freedmen, scholars and emperors. Each celebrated differently, through feasts, prayers, poetry, or public games. Yet beneath all variety, a single thread ran steady, the reminder that life itself was worthy of honor. Birthdays were Rome's way of saying that time, though fleeting, was sacred. The symbol of continuity. The garlands that wilted, the flowers that faded, the candles that flickered out, these were not losses, but symbols. They reminded Romans that life, too, passes, yet renews again with each year, each generation, each flame relit. The birthday was not only a personal joy, but a ritual of continuity, a quiet promise that the circle of existence endures. Night's embrace. As every Roman birthday ended, lamps dimmed, courtyards grew still, and the city's sounds faded into the hush of night. The celebrant, whether farmer or emperor, reclined upon bed or couch, carrying into sleep the warmth of prayers, of laughter, of companionship. In that silence, the birthday was complete, its echoes lingering softly like the glow of dying embers. For us today, though centuries have passed, the Roman birthday speaks to us still. In our own cakes and candles, in our own wishes and gatherings, we continue an ancient rhythm. Every flame we light is kin to theirs, every wish a whisper in the same long story of human hope. Closing gently. So now, as this tale draws to a close, imagine the quiet of the Roman night. The stars above the forum, the hush of villas, the peace of fields resting after harvest. Somewhere, in that ancient world, another birthday ended, another candle was blown out, another soul drifted into sleep beneath the same sky that covers us tonight. And with that image, gentle, timeless, serene, we let the story rest. Crescent-shaped moon, good night. May your dreams be soft, and your rest deep.